Welcome back to the Action Autism podcast on our segment Mind Matters. I'm one of your hosts, Arshia Singh, a rising senior at Dublin High School, with my co-host Anvesha Bhagat, a rising junior at Academy of Math, Science, and Engineering. And today we're honored to be joined by a very special guest, Ms. Zhara Astra. Before we go any further, Zara, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Zara. I am a screenwriter, a producer, an educator, and an author on female neurodivergences.
Here at Action Autism, we advocate for autistic youth and understand how emotional experiences are often overlooked, especially for those who process the world in a unique and non-traditional ways. That's why we're so thrilled to be speaking with Zara today. She is a talented screenwriter and a professor who focuses on neurodivergence in media and education. Through her creative storytelling and work, she has shifted the narrative around what it means to be neurodivergent, pushing for authentic representation. In a culture that often elevates logic over lived experience, her perspective reminds us that every mind has a story worth telling. We hope this conversation shows connection and a deeper appreciation for the power of inclusion.
So now diving right into our questions, Zara, my first question for you is that you've discovered that you're autistic with ADHD as an adult. Can you kind of share what that moment of realization was like and also kind of how it changed the course of your life?
I have a son who was 5 years old at the time, and he got a diagnosis of autism or, Asperger's at the time. And I remember looking at a lot of his symptoms and I said, yeah, but I have that and I did that and I did that. And somebody close to me said, well, I think you might also be autistic. And I went through a whole wave of emotions, but for me, I needed to see tangible evidence. So initially, I did a brain scan. And it seemed to be, even though this is early stages of being able to see that in a scan, there seemed to be some gray and white matter that was congruent with being autistic. And then I still didn't believe it, so I went through a year-long process of getting an assessment. Because when you were an adult and when you were a female, it's a lot more challenging to get diagnosed and to find a doctor who understands the presentation and the differences in females. So I went through that process. I got diagnosed, and I just remember going through this complex wave of varied emotions from a sense of relief, like, wow, okay, I can understand myself and why I have operated in the world the way that I do, why I had some of the challenges that I had growing up. Um, and then I and then I went through a bit of imposter syndrome, okay, maybe I'm not actually autistic, maybe I just made this up. And then I got angry. And the anger is what really pushed me into the line of work that I'm doing and changed the trajectory of my career. Because my thought behind that was, if I'm in my 30s and I'm just now being diagnosed, how many other girls and women are being left out of the equation? And how many girls could we have safeguarded and helped in the process? Um, because we know there's not just challenges, but there's a lot of dangers that come along with being autistic, especially if you're undiagnosed. Your parents don't know how to help you, what to look out for, how to protect you from some of the dangers in the world. So that's really what changed the trajectory of my career and wanting to help other girls and women n not fly under the radar.
That's amazing. So, like, kind of, how did your childhood look like?
I grew up in Houston, Texas, and it was it, it was a difficult childhood in the sense that I was just different from everyone else, and I had a lot of strange little mannerisms in the ways that I ate. And one of the things, for instance, food eating was always really difficult for me. And I remember, some of my friends and stuff kind of making fun of me for the way that I ate and the foods that I ate. And it wasn't until I was teaching the course that I teach, and one of my students wrote a paper on RFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, that I discovered that my bizarre kind of eating patterns, it was directly related to my neurotype. but when you're undiagnosed, especially in the 90s and it was just a different world. So I felt like I was constantly being judged, or I was told that I was just difficult, dramatic, too sensitive, too much, right? And now that we know, okay, well, she's autistic, it just changes things. And it would have changed my childhood in a lot of ways.
Hmm. So kind of shifting to your work from screenwriting and like producing and teaching and speaking, how do your creative and academic identities connect with your neurodivergence?
Hmm. Well, I'd say in creative fields, um, everything is kind of related. And a majority of Hollywood, I would say, are on the spectrum somewhere, right? And a lot are diagnosed and kind of keep that concealed, and a lot are undiagnosed. Um, but I'd say this neurotype, it's not just that it's your identity, it's woven in everything you do. It's in the way that I view the world. It's in the way that I view my work, the way that I view scripts and how I approach things. And um, yeah, I would say that much. It's infused in everything that I do and the way that I see the world. So there's no way to differentiate or disconnect the two.
Hmm.
That's really well said. Also, kind of just continuing on to your work as a professor, what kind of led you to create the first university course on understanding neurodivergent women and girls? And kind of like, how was it received? Was it different than what you expected, or
Well, the seed of my work as an educator, again, it was birthed out of anger. I was mad. I wrote an article for Scientific American magazine about the problem with the female diagnosis, and that went worldwide and it blew up. And suddenly I was being reached out to from magazines, publications, universities across the globe that wanted me to come and talk about it or write about it. And I got linked up with Arizona State University, and they asked me to come out and do a guest lecture for their counseling department. So all these, future counselors and educators. I came and I spoke, and it ended up being a packed house. We had people flooded out into the hallway. And afterwards, the dean of the school and some of the professors came up to me, and they were so moved by it that they said this needs to be its own course. So they asked me to develop what turned out to be, we didn't know at the time, it turned out to be the first university course in the world on neurodivergent women and girls.
That's amazing. That's really well said too. And then kind of, why do you think that female autism has been so overlooked in like the cultural and medical narratives?
Hmm. Well, I think that autism in females is overlooked for one because we are looking for male traits, which tend to be more observable. And this is also perpetuated in film and media, right? So we're diagnosing young boys and we're looking at how it presents in them, and we see the hand flapping and we see these more stereotypical observable traits. And then you have film and television, and started out with Rain Man in the 80s, and you have these media outlets, and they are now, creating and perpetuating more of that imagery of the young autistic boy, the white male savant, right? The good doctor, the geniuses, right? So it's not just medically now, it's culturally. We look at that and we said, well, this is what autism is. Or it's the nonverbal boy, it's the hand flapping, it's the savant. And then when a girl comes in the picture, well, she's just what were my labels? She's difficult, she's dramatic, she's sensitive, right? We're put in a completely different category. And we know that girls are hugely misdiagnosed and women misdiagnosed with, we're told we either have a mood-based disorder or a menstrual-related disorder. 17, 1800s, early 1900s, she's hysterical, right? It's anything other than the possibility that she could have a differing kind of neurotype.
Hmm. And then, so you kind of mentioned that you wrote for the Scientific American and Los Angeles magazine. So, what's one change in clinical practice you believe needs to happen to better support autistic women?
I believe that the DSM needs to create a subtype for females, which I've been talking about this for years, which I call rara avis syndrome, which means rare bird or a rare or exceptional human, because I think that's what autistic females are. And by having our own subtype, that has a list of traits that are more specific to the female neurotype. I think that would do a huge service to females. It would help us to get diagnosed. It would help to broaden the way that autism is viewed globally and help get those early diagnosis and get the help and the safeguards that these girls need. But it starts out with that. It starts with a diagnosis. And until we broaden what autism is in the DSM, we're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, right now the DSM doesn't have any kind of subgroup for that.
The DSM took away the subtypes. The last was Asperger's. So
Oh,
they got rid of that and they put us all under the umbrella term ASD, autism spectrum disorder.
Mm.
Um, and I just think that was a huge mistake.
yeah, no, I agree. That's really disappointing.
Yeah.
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 I mean, I have a cousin who is, we call it, we're trying to get away from the high functioning, low functioning terms there. But we would say somebody that has more needs more assistance is profoundly autistic. So I have a profoundly autistic cousin who is non-speaking. He lives in a home. He's more of what we would view that stereotypical autistic person as. And I grew up thinking, well, that's autism. He's autistic, not me, right?
Yeah.
Um, so having him, who is very different from me, from Elon Musk, from a lot of these, these well-accomplished people, I think that it makes it a lot more difficult to see autism in
Mhm.
people like me or in girls or, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense, especially for the need for such a subtype.
Mhm.
I would never have even, I never even realized that. So I'm really happy, like glad that you brought that up. And also kind of talking about another collaboration that you did with Simon Baron Cohen at Cambridge University. It was an autism education project, and we were researching it, and we found it to be such an important initiative. But I did have a question as to like what kind of impacts do you hope this project has on autism, on how it's taught, and kind of also how it's understood globally?
The mission with the Cambridge University Autism Education Program, which we're calling the 50 Faces of Autism, the mission there is to broaden the view of autism outside, as we just said, outside of what the DSM states this is autism. So they have this little bucket of it, and we are trying to broaden it. So this project specifically is going to be used to educate doctors, therapists, medical professionals worldwide, to help expand the narrative of what autism is and broaden it and help more underserved communities and demographics to get diagnosed.
Yeah, that's amazing. So like thinking about like schools and university, what roles do you think they should play into dismantling the stigma and like around neurodivergent girls? Like what's some steps that they can take today?
I mean, I think more education, more podcasts like this, classes like the one I'm teaching. Um, I mean, that's really how we start to change anything is by educating people. There's a huge movement in social media where the majority of autistic girls and women that I know are learning about themselves are through other actual autistic people. So it's about creating a platform to highlight these stories and these neurotypes. And, I think it starts there. You guys are doing it here, you know?
Yeah. So back to kind of like your work, your PBS documentary, Understanding Autism, kind of highlights women's experiences. So what do you think it's the most surprising or emotional takeaway during the filming process?
Ooh, I'd say one of the more emotional takeaways from the Understanding Autism film, it came with speaking to the parents
Mhm.
of these autistic kids. It's the mothers. The mothers are out here changing the world. The mothers are the ones that are creating these organizations to help their own children, t teaching the courses, developing all of this stuff. And one of the big takeaways, or one of the most heartfelt or infuriating things, honestly, was talking to the Black mothers of autistic children. Because what we see, and is not just girls, this is, boys as well, but what we're seeing is that when a young white male would come in and present with autistic traits, he is given an IEP, he is given treatment plan, he is given help, he's given counseling, therapy. They see him, they help him. When a young Black male, a young Black child is showing the same traits, they are oftentimes, according to these mothers, told that they have a behavioral problem, right? That there's just this deeply rooted racism in our education system, in our, in healthcare and everything. And that was one of the hardest things to see in this film is these mothers that was like, my child has needed help for years, and he was ignored because he's not white.
Yeah, that's that's really disappointing.
Yeah.
Mm.
But kind of also, I had another follow-up with the process of like making the film. What was kind of like some of the steps you took to like, for example, develop the script? Like you mentioned, you interviewed mothers. So was that kind of like input that you used to make the script or like in filming?
Well, I'd say that for understanding autism, we kind of developed it as we went along. We didn't necessarily have it, it changed as time went on, as more stories were unveiled, as we dug into it deeper, it just the story changed from what we had initially thought that it would be. So we basically would find a really juicy autism, center. I mean, we went to MIT, we went to different places like that. And then we would build a shoot day or a shoot week around there. So when we went and filmed at MIT, we knew this is a big one. We're going to be filming the brain scans. We're going to be filming with some of the biggest doctors in the world. And then we would find stories of actual people, actual autistic people and families that were in that area. And we filmed hundreds of people. Going to cities like London, that was a really huge, that was a huge job in itself because that's where we filmed Simon Baron Cohen and Cambridge University. And then we would just build our days out around those mega centers.
Oh, nice. That's really cool. Also, in your view, what would you say authentic representation of women with autism in film and television should look like? And also, what are some of the common missteps that you like happen?
It's funny because autistic women are all over film. We have been for decades. They just don't label us.
Mhm.
The manic pixie dream girl is an autistic woman. Eternal sunshine of the spotless mind. They're often depicted with colored hair. They're eccentric, they're out there. Maybe they're a loner, and their whole mission in the film is to take our male protagonist and to help him to realize his destiny and, take him along on this journey in a really interesting way. That character, she's autistic. We're just not talking about it. Wednesday Addams, she's autistic. And I think that if we actually started labeling these characters instead of just like stealing little juicy tidbits of their personality, then it would help more autistic girls to see themselves in these characters.
Hmm. Kind of shifting from characters to like the real world. What would you what advice would you give to girls or women who suspect that they have autism but are afraid to get the diagnosis or speak up?
Mm. Um, well, I'll just say this is that if you suspect that you're autistic female, there's a good chance you are because neurotypical girls aren't just going out there making lists of autistic traits. Um, so I mean, step one, if you're there, then there's a good chance that you're on the spectrum. Um, and I would say understanding yourself is such a gift, a privilege, a benefit. Had I known that I was autistic, it would have changed my life entirely. Autistic girls, women can be very hard on ourselves. We can suffer with anxiety disorder. We suffer in a lot of different ways. Suicidal ideations. One of the reasons I do this work is because suicide rates among autistic women and girls is 3 to 4 times higher than anyone else. Double that if she has ADHD, which 80% of us do. So if you understand, hey, I'm autistic, I have sensitivities to this, I'm experiencing a burnout, this is just because of my brain, then, maybe you'll have a little more grace with yourself. Maybe you won't take it that far. Maybe you'll be able to understand what you need, right? Because you can't understand how to accommodate yourself if you don't understand yourself. So I know if I go to a big speaking event or a big party, or if I'm around a lot of people, I'm going to need a couple days to recover because I'm going to experience that overwhelm, that burnout. And that knowing yourself in that kind of like depth can't come without understanding why you're different or that you might be autistic.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
your mission here is like really inspiring.
and I
Thank
kind
you.
of get that. Um, so I would honestly describe you as probably like as a thoughtful leader and also a change maker. But what kind of would keep you grounded and energized in this work with all of the projects that you've done, all the success you've had?
Grounded and energized in the work. God, every time I mean, talking to you girls, this is energizing, this is inspiring, this is making me want to keep going in this work, right? Because it is easy to get burnout and be like, okay, I've been doing the autism circuit for years now. Maybe I want to shift gears, but talking to you and talking to other women and parents along the way really helps to keep me motivated because I see how much work we have to do and I see how many parents and how many women are out here just stranded feeling like an alien alone on this planet. So I think engaging with people is really helpful. And then I think that in my personal life, I play tennis and I surf. That's really important for me just to stay grounded in general and not allow the world to be so overwhelming that I just shut down because that can happen a lot too with us.
Hmm. So, what is one strength or trait you believe that society should celebrate more in neurodivergent women?
Sensitivity. There's this whole myth that autistic people aren't empathetic, right? We're not sensitive. And the truth is that we are so incredibly sensitive that sometimes it just shuts us down and it can make us temporarily mute, silent, or maybe perhaps we just don't react emotionally in the same way that other people do and they expect of that. Our sensitivity is one of our greatest gifts. It's one of our greatest superpowers. It really is. With that, we have the ability to tune in and to connect with anyone on the planet from all walks of Earth. We have this insane intuition because we feel so much, not just, the fabric on my skin and the smells and but we feel so much energetically as well from people, and we read people. This whole pattern recognition. I think the autistic boys get the best rap for that because they're like, oh, they can see this pattern recognition in coding, right? So we know that these software companies, they hire autistic young men because they can detect, breaks and things. But it's women, we have pattern detection with people. I can read people in a way that a lot of people can't. I walk in and can scan a room and I can tell when someone's lying to me. I can tell when they're sad, when and we pick up on a lot of things with our sensitivity that the majority of other people don't. And I think that's a beautiful gift that should be celebrated.
I agree.
Yeah, and like they say, a woman's intuition is like no other. So,
Absolutely.
And kind of just wrapping up, my final question for today is if you could rewrite the narrative around autism in just one sentence, especially for young neurodivergent girls who are listening right now, what would it be?
That's tough. I would tell young autistic girls that you are not flawed. You are not broken. You are not too sensitive. You are not too dramatic. You're not too difficult. You are not too much. You are a beautiful composition of a rare bird, a unique and special woman. And with that, you have the ability to change the world and the people around you.
That's beautifully said. So, to conclude today's segment, thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Zara, for sharing your experience and advice. We really appreciate you taking your time to talk to us, and that's the end of today's episode.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you so much.
Keep doing the work that you're doing because this is important.